This week's episode is brought to you by Adorama. From photo books to prints on paper, metal, or canvas, Adorama can help you to preserve and display your most precious memories. And by viewers like you. Visit photorec.tv/support to learn how you can support this show and join our community of photographers. Hello everybody. Welcome back to another Photo Mishmash. This is episode 92. Welcome back. I'm Toby, photographer and educator.
And I'm Scott, also
and
photographer
International
and educator.
PhotoRec TV correspondent. I just gave you that title. And coming to us with better bandwidth tonight. So we're excited. Thanks for coming back.
Much better.
Taking some time.
Thank you for having me back.
This is that weekly show where we take the week's photo news and we kind of mash it up into a big old ball and we talk about some of the stories. All of the stories we're going to be talking about and some that we're not, but are interesting to share, will be in the show notes that are linked right down below this video. And yeah, I think that's all we say. Yeah.
Pretty much.
Let's get right into it. Well, let's tell you about some of the stories we're going to be talking about tonight. As the big ones is this article that's a little bit polarizing about Sony and the fact that maybe their full-frame mirrorless is going to be a complete and total flop at some point in the future because of a few fatal flaws. We'll have to talk about the source of that article first, though. We wonder about the megapixel race. Is it heating back up, or maybe it never died? And kind of compare the consumer versus the prosumer and how much megapixels do they really need? And what was the other big story? Oh, we're all grumpy, apparently.
We're all grumpy. I'm grumpy.
I'm grumpy, too. You might be grumpy because it's getting a little bit late there. We're going to try to keep this show a little bit tighter, a little bit, a little more succinct. I have issues doing that sometimes. I apologize up front. But we also have... Talking. I will this time, I will. We also have your fantastic old Instagram images to pick some winners and honorable mentions, our photos from space, and your questions answered. So if you've got questions while you're watching this show live, put them in the chat room. Put a little Q in front of them. Roy is watching for that. He will be grabbing those, and we'll be answering them towards the end of the show. So the first part of the show that we usually talk about is the week in review, stuff that has gone out on this channel in the past week that you might have missed. And it's been a little quiet, a little bit of work behind the scenes, but I did get out a remove distracting objects video. There was an Instagram picture I posted a while ago of a cute little bird from New Zealand, and got a nice response on that, and I wanted to show people the behind the scenes of the Photoshop because there was a good bit of work there. It was not the best composition. Actually, truthfully, it wasn't the best composition, wasn't the best exposure. It had a lot of things wrong with it straight out of the camera. But through the magic of Photoshop and Lightroom, fixed it up pretty nice so you can take a look at that. And then today, I teased this. Let's look at this right now. Riley, we can look at my screen for a second. I'll just get this out of the way. I teased this. I said, what is this a shot of? And is it pulling in the right screen? No. Hang on a second. Let me make sure that the screen is working correctly. How about now? Try now, Riley. I seem to have lost my screen for a second, so we'll come back to that in a little... Oh, it's up now. Phew. So I posted this, and I knew what some people would guess. I thought some people would be able to get it as well. I said, what is this? To me, it looks like a macro of corduroy, but it is in fact, as Ryan Weeks guessed, bird's eye view of a field taken from the 3DR Solo. Now, if you followed me on Snapchat for a little while, you would have seen the day, the night, or the evening I posted this. I was very excited. I'll have some follow-up video that's going to come out on Instagram in a little while that shows a little bit more of the behind the scenes, but I've had a lot of fun with the aerial photography. I will be talking more about that soon. Basically, I'm procrastinating my review as long as possible because when I'm done the review, I think they're going to ask for it back. And if I haven't done the review yet, well then I still have to do more. It's been a lot of fun. Yeah, so we'll talk more about that down the road. I mentioned Snapchat. If you follow me on Snapchat, PhotoRec Toby, same name, you just got a behind-the-scenes look of this messy, messy office. So you always see this nice clean, but the rest of this place is a bit of a disaster, and it's much...
I've seen it. I've seen it on Skype. It is not clean.
There's a...
Yeah.
I know, I need to tidy up. And I'm moving in the not-so-distant future, and there's a lot of crap in here that I don't want to move with. So... keep an eye out for behind the scenes on Snapchat and maybe posts of who wants this lens or that lens. Nothing terribly exciting that I'm going to give away, but there's some stuff I need to get rid of. So we have some lovely sponsors for this week's episode, one of those being Megapixels. They are a fantastic place to get. Now, I think they will ship to the UK, but I don't think it's a very... You probably have somebody better in the UK to order from that makes a little bit more financial sense.
It's probably not
even with this coupon code. But we've got 2 great coupon codes for you. We'll link those right down below. They're also in the show notes already. Both of them save you 20% off smaller size prints, 8x10 and smaller, and 16x20 and up. And I just want to take a minute and say, first off, once you use this coupon code, even without the coupon code, these prices are very, very reasonable. But you use the coupon code, and I mean, it's kind of ridiculous. It's like $1 or something to get a nice size print. And what often holds me back from getting prints is the thinking of like getting it matted, getting it framed, and all of that stuff. And really, I want to show you a quick fun trick. And that is, you get a little bit, I didn't come up with this on my own, just let you know that up front. But you come up with one of these little like twine balls, and you get a little piece of twine, and you get these little clips, these little kind of antique-y looking metal clips on the end. And you get yourself a couple of 8x10s that literally cost, a couple of 8x10s literally cost $2 or $3 with this coupon code. You put a little nail in the wall, and you just clip them like so, and that's it. And if you wanted to get a little bit fancy, because sometimes there can be a little warpage, especially if you've got high humidity in your house, you could get a little bit of matting board back there and sticky tape or tack them back to the matting board as well. But what's kind of cool about this is you can just flip through to another picture when you get tired of looking at the sheep faces. And instead you can look at, this old abandoned farmhouse in Iceland. Or, if you wanted to, the other picture I have is my brother's beard, which I really like when I do this. That's going to be my...
That's not as good. That's
no,
not as good
Riley's
as
got a good beard. We got to get Riley on camera a little bit at some point in the future so that...
yeah, you're going to have to
so
get on Riley.
Thank you to him, and also so you can see he's got a good beard. All right, so those coupon codes are fantastic. Take 5 minutes. Find your favorite picture you have made in the last month, week, and get it printed. It's so cheap. They look beautiful. It comes very quickly, and it's cheap. I said that already. So thank you to Megapixels for sponsoring this. Now, the next part of the show we usually get to is the gear on the table. And, I mentioned the drone, the Sony's still here. I do have to still talk about that. But what's really important is because, Bean and Liam have moved on along with Christina. Angela's feeling sorry about that and feeling sorry that I didn't have a cat on the table. Now, Scott, you've got real cats there.
Yeah, they're not here at the minute, but I'm sure if I wiggled some food, they'll be here. So we'll take a slight rain check on it, and if they turn up, I will put one of them in shop.
In the meantime, we've got this cat who sadly doesn't have a name. Now, you people out there are very clever, and I'm sure can come up with a good name. Probably something better than Bodie McBoatface or Caddy McFace. Didn't that happen in your country, didn't it? The boat that was going to get named, they put it on the internet, and everybody wanted to name it Bodie McBoatface. Yeah. Okay.
And they did it.
So I'm not saying what you come up with is what I'm going to automatically choose. So whatever. You can write Caddy McCatface in the comments if you want to. It's not original now since I just said it. But something clever and cute for this cat that is going to be a little bit of a Photorec.tv mascot in the future. Thank you, Angela. Thank you all for your clever responses that you're coming up with. All right?
I do have some gear on the table.
We did talk about that. Sorry, go ahead.
We did. Yeah, just cut me off. I have the Peak Design Slide Light Strap. Peak Design kindly sent me this along with their, what's the Capture Pro clip, which I'm also testing out ahead of a review. I use this strap at the weekend wedding, alongside a knockoff Black Rapid strap. And I really like this. This worked really well on my Sony a7 II because it's not that heavy, and it kept it really nicely balanced. It's really good quality. Unfortunately, we're just using the webcam in my laptop at the moment, so it's not great quality, but you can. This is really adjustable. The Peak Design clip system is really clever, so you can just swap it straight off for like a nice hand strap. And yeah, it's configurable in different ways. If you've got a tripod,
Yeah,
plate,
where did you make your attachment points on the Sony?
I put them at the standard strap point, and I was really kind of happy with it. It's kind of, the material is like a seatbelt. It feels just like a seatbelt, so it slides really easily. Yeah, I've been really happy with it. It's hopefully everything I get sent is this good.
It's nice.
So yeah, hopefully I'll be filming that review at the weekend, so that'll be coming out. But yeah, really solid.
Looking forward to that. I like how configurable it is. I don't like putting it at the normal attachment points because that seems to get in my way, but I do a side attachment, one at the side and one at the bottom. So I like that as well. Yeah, good. We look forward to that, Scott. And you know, real quick before we get into the news section, I plugged my Snapchat a little bit, but both of us have other social media, including Instagram and Twitter. So Riley, can we throw those up on the screen? Because you can follow Scott or myself in those. And that's a great way to see what we're up to when we're not sitting here in front of you once a week, and our general thoughts. And it's a great way to reach out to us and say hi. I have people that's starting to ask me lots of questions behind the scenes on Instagram, which isn't necessarily my favorite place to answer questions because the interface is really just phone-based, and so writing a longer question, that's the old person in me. I really don't like to write long responses on my phone unless I have to. But
I've had some good questions on Instagram recently, some good interaction in the last week. It's
that's right. It's fun.
Been good hearing from everyone, really.
And yeah, that's all we'll say about Instagram because we spent too much time talking about them in the last two shows because of all of their changes. But one change they've made now is a minute-long videos we can post. I haven't tried that yet, but I hope to soon post a video up to 60 seconds long.
Maybe you can post a drone video.
I have a few of them. All right, let's get right into our news and talk a little bit about some of the top stories that we decided this week. Scott, you're going to lead off with this Megapixel article, Why Full Frame Pro Mirrorless Was a Fatal Mistake, or I should say Sony's Full Frame Pro Mirrorless. And I'll pull that article up.
Yeah, so this was an article on Megapixel, is that today? 2 days ago, which has had a lot of comments, as you'd expect. 13,000 shares, that's quite a lot. Effectively, this was, without doing any research, a guy that owned a full frame mirrorless camera and is preaching about how it's going to fail in the professional world. Quite a flawed argument, really, with most of his comments. He tended to just kind of use a lot of stuff based around size.
I say he spent a lot of time on size. And
incorrectly.
Well, I'll say he's there is certainly some basis for some of his arguments. I'm not going to say he's completely wrong.
Yeah.
But the amount of time he spent on the size for the amount of time that I think Sony says, hey, buy this because it's smaller, isn't in proportion. I don't feel like Sony is saying that this is the answer to your big DSLR always and forever as being a smaller thing.
Yeah, I don't think that's certainly not why I bought my Sony a7 II at all. The size and the weight didn't really come into it, and it's also only looking at the length of it, which is totally different. The biggest thing I noticed at the wedding that I shot this weekend, I had my 5D Mark III on one side and my a7 II on the other, and the Sony's a lot deeper and it feels different in the hand. I think a lot of people would probably find the 5D Mark III more comfortable. The grip is probably a little bit deeper, but I felt really comfortable using that Sony. The balance is not right, and using adapted lenses, obviously. But if I was using some native lenses, possibly. A lot of his argument
Then weight.
tends to be based on size, and then around the fact that that other companies use in-body image stabilization, but just because another company uses it doesn't mean.
You mentioned this.
That
You
it's
said
not
basically his arguments didn't affect, or they're not counter to the reasons you bought your Sony for, which you have the Sony A7 Mark II. Do you want to just talk a little bit about why you bought your Sony?
Yeah. I bought my Sony because I need 2 cameras for weddings and events. You always need to have a backup. And the idea for me was that I had something slightly different so that I would use it outside of a time for an event. I have been carrying around my 5D for travel, which is kind of big and heavy, but it was never really much of a hindrance. And the Sony is a different type of camera, which allowed me to use my existing lenses, and is something that I would use differently. It's a full frame camera with inbuilt Wi-Fi, things like focus peaking, really good video and in-body image stabilization, and I can use my existing lenses on it. So that was a really good option for me. Something like a 6D is a great camera, but it's not really much different to a 5D. It's slightly smaller, so I probably still wouldn't take it out. I'd still pick up the 5D. And I've been really happy just for my general use photography.
Which some could say
the Sony
you're arguing in favor, saying for
really
your kind of general use, so not your professional, you're very happy using it. So,
Yep. Definitely not for, and the counter argument to that, particularly it showed up at a wedding, I would definitely not use this for a main wedding camera, at least not with any of my adapted lenses. Maybe with native lenses. I don't think the focusing system on the A7 Mark II is good enough, and it doesn't track that well. So, and the 5D clearly won through in those scenarios, but for candid shots, for post shots that weren't using any off-camera flash or anything like that.
Reasons. Again, there's some, Dalibor has said this, I've seen other people say that he's actually, the author of this article is a Fuji-sponsored photographer. So, I don't know. We haven't had that confirmed. Definitely, he shoots with Fuji.
Have we had that confirmed?
Some people are saying that. So, hey, it's on the internet, so that must be true. I'll say we took a quick look at his photos before, and the quality of a photographer should not impact their opinion about gear. But I will just say that I think he should spend more time just trying to improve his craft with whatever camera he has in hand, and less time taking so many screenshots of camerasize.com. But clearly I agree with him to some degree, because I made a video that was like, here are my reasons why I don't want to use this Sony as my primary camera. You said some of them already. But I will say for travel and landscape photography, which some of that could be considered professional use, I absolutely love the Sony. It is the best camera for me. And the reasons I bought it were that nice articulating screen, the focus peaking, the 4K, the image stabilization. There are times where I can head out the door without a tripod at all. That's some serious weight savings versus a typical DSLR that doesn't have in-body image stabilization, and I'm not able to shoot at those slower shutter speeds without a tripod. So it depends on what you're doing. And I think we've covered that enough. There is a great rebuttal. So again, this will be linked right down below. And another photographer has done a very nice rebuttal of this as well that goes point by point, probably even better than we just talked about. But again, we talk about gear a lot on this channel because I'm a little bit of a gearhead. Scott, I think you're a little bit of a gearhead. You enjoy, but we got to remember that it is not the gear that makes these photographs. It's you. And well, in a few minutes we're going to talk a little bit about megapixels, and that's gotten me thinking about how many megapixels do we need, and the answer is most of us way less than we have, and cameras from many years ago can make fantastic images. So I covered that story already. That's all we need. All right, let's but you know what, all this talk of gear is apparently is making photographers grumpy, or at least that's part of it. So Frankie Photo, who has a podcast now apparently, I listened to the first couple of minutes and heard him say that it is the best podcast on the internet. I like that. He's got an article about photographers being grumpy, and he's got a couple of points. first point. Photographers don't seem to smile at each other very much. So when he's out taking pictures, he notices that other photographers are just kind of, I think they're into what they're doing, and they don't seem to be so friendly. Now, I can't just dismiss his opinion, but I will say that I've had a much more pleasant time in running into other photographers at places, maybe because I'm already smiling because I like to meet people and talk to them. Or my other experience of being around a lot of photographers is the McKay trips. And people, you go back and listen to one of those vlogs where we're coming out of the park, and people are just cracking up in the background and having fun and taking pictures. So I think it's a little bit about the crowd you're traveling around with. But, if somebody's very serious about what they're doing, they might not be so smiley. They might be focused on their craft. So that's one thing. Second point, the harshest critics of photographers are other photographers. Yeah, it's true. Well, I think it's partly slightly defensive.
Yeah, that's fine.
I almost feel like I was just that about the Sator guy who wrote the Sony full frame article. I was like, those pictures aren't very good. But, we all have these opinions. The internet allows us to share these opinions left and right for better or worse. Many of you share your opinions on this show and my other videos. Lots and lots and lots. And, a lot of that is constructive criticism. Some of it's just criticism. So, yeah, it happens.
I think that point is probably, out of this whole article, is probably the biggest point. And it's probably my main reason for not really doing much commenting around Megapixel. Is that there's always, because it's the internet, there's always somebody that's got something to say about what you're doing. And you post stuff in photography groups, just anyone's, there's a few that aren't the same, but most photography groups, and people will go, oh, you missed this, or you didn't do this, or you didn't do this. And sometimes it's not really about getting the most perfect technical shot. Sometimes it's about capturing that moment, just capturing something that, just telling the photo story is really, for me, the most important thing. My pictures are far from technically perfect, and I've not had a client complain about them. The only things I get from, in terms of criticism, are from other photographers. And they're saying, hey, maybe you should have done this, maybe you should have done that. And I sort of thought,
right.
Maybe you should have been hired for that job, but you weren't. Actually, I was. So, yeah, I think the internet's got a big thing to do with that. Photographers not smiling at each other so much. I kind of lean towards what you said on that one as well. I've not really had that. The only negativity
so it's all the internet's fault.
tend to
So maybe
see
we should just say internet
is on the
photographers that spend too much time on
Really?
the internet, or photographers on the internet are grumpy. Although this guy says he's out there shooting. Is that all of his points? I thought there was one more. I don't know where Frankie lives.
Where does he live?
But
Where does Frankie live?
I thought there was one more point. Oh yeah, no, there's yeah. Photographers don't seem to want other photographers around. Well, this is also the same thing. So his story here, and Scott, I don't know if you read this point, but his story here is the bride and groom asked him to come to a wedding and also take pictures.
Yeah.
There was a professionally hired photographer there. Now, as a photographer who has covered weddings before, you as well, there can be a big worry. We are being paid. We have certain images we need to make, and if some Joe with a camera steps in our way, suddenly make our job very difficult. Now, that doesn't mean you have to be grumpy at them or to them, but you don't know the whole story in this case, and it turns out, sounds like this photographer that was hired was pretty unhappy with him taking there. Again, it's all about introducing yourself and starting with a smile. I think that's where you got to start off. Yeah.
I think it's people management at the, or if you're shooting a wedding, we had a big discussion on this, didn't we? A show months ago, really, about do you let other photographers take pictures at weddings that you're doing. The wedding I shot at the weekend, we requested that people didn't take photographs during the main part of the ceremony, and that then they'd be invited at certain points. They were. Everyone was happy with that. And then the post shots, you had the odd people over my shoulder with a point and shoot, and a couple of people followed us for the main ones. There was another photographer there who was one of their friends. He had a nice 7D, a nice 24 to 70. He had a grip. He had the whole flash, the whole rig. And you know what? There was no real problem with that. He asked at any point if he wanted to get any of the shots. He didn't do anything over my shoulder, and I did a couple of bits, and then I invited him. I said, hey, if you want to get some shots, you know, there's so many photographers. I can't see the fact that we're competing for space. And I think if you're the main guy or the main lady shooting an event or a wedding, if you manage the situation correctly, it's not a problem. And I think particularly this article with people being grumpy, particularly main photographers, if you're grumpy towards someone, you're more likely to have a problem with them. I think if you approach it, as you said, in more of a happy scenario and look at things in their better light, then actually things are probably going to go a little bit better for you. I think if you get people's backs up a little bit, that's when things go wrong.
Treat you and be smiling. Yeah, so the next one is photographers get so competitive they start landing blows. It's got this, I don't know, is this real? This looks like a stock photo to me. But it's, I don't know if you saw this in the article, a beat up guy. So it's labeled a battered photographer returns for Yosemite. Yeah. Now, I know there are some special locations where you want to be right at the perfect spot at the right time. Some of these photographers are not professionals. They just, they got off work, they took time, they spent a lot of money to get to certain locations, and so they really want to try to get a shot. And that can be stressful. I don't think I have an answer for that other than try to be respectful of the people you're around and work with them. There have been times where we've been set up on the trip, and not just trip participants, but like saying, oh, hey, do you want to get your tripod right in here? Helping them, again, just being nice. I don't know, am I teaching people to be nice? I think you already know this. But just making sure that they know they can put their tripod like right up underneath mine, and it's better to do that now while you say, hey, do that, as opposed to in a minute when you trigger your shutter and then they try to move it a little bit and end up banging yours. So I've just had good experiences with other photographers around. I have one story from Rainier National Park. They weren't in my shot, but there was a photographer in another photographer's shot. I feel like I've told this story before. That photographer sent his wife down to see if the guy would move from his shot, and the guy was like, nope. Well, actually, the wife went down. You could see they were small talking for a little bit, and then she looked back at her husband, and she was like, he's not moving. So, the guy had found a nice spot. It's hard to blame him for that. There was just a couple of us there, and it felt like the other guy could move, could do a little clone stamp. So, that's right. Some photographers get upset about new technologies and change. Hey, didn't you have a conversation on Twitter this week with somebody who said anybody using ISO 3200 and above didn't know how to do photography right?
Oh, yeah. So, yeah, the Northrops were talking. The Northrops have been talking about the D5, and there's this way of testing that they have, which isn't. Well, it's not something that I'm hugely interested in, but there is a big demand for it, and people want to know what it's like at ISO 81000 and ISO 3 million, and I think my point was that it's interesting to see what it's like at ISO 81000 because it means that I don't have to constantly shoot at 2.8 and 3.2 throughout an entire wedding. It'd be nice to actually be able to shoot at f8 in a wedding, and because it would actually give me some nice room and I would get a much higher keeper rate if you could use that. It was responded to me saying that anyone who shoots in excess of ISO 3200 does not know how to use their camera properly. And my camera takes pictures, not me. And their justifications were that they used to shoot film. And then the second justification, which I didn't know how it was related because I was talking about ISO, not the D5, is that the angry photographer says that the Nikon D5 is terrible. So it must be terrible. We had an exchange, and then in the end, it was one of those things. Some people are, they're so fixated on their part of the argument that they're not really willing to take someone else's opinion. Why would you never? You can't shoot a wedding
Probably
indoors
not. Well, in
below
some situations,
3200
right,
unless
right,
you're at
yep,
like 1.2.
yeah. Well, again, so maybe their
It just
perspective
doesn't
is they've
happen.
only ever shot out during noonday sun or something, and not even on a cloudy day. So yeah, and so people get all uppity about these changes, and I'd say embrace them. The ones that work for you, and the ones that don't worry about it. But if you don't want to shoot above ISO 3200, sure, go ahead and shoot yourself in your foot in a dark closet. Right.
Continue shooting
Because a
with a
blurry
shutter speed
picture
of
is
1.5
better than a
seconds
grainy
in low
picture.
light and see how that works.
That's right. Brides love blurry pictures. So, but that
Much better.
yeah, people get upset about change, and it does. So I think at the bottom here it says
probably
trying to
leads
stay
us into
positive
our
and out of
next
the grump
article,
zone. What's he say
actually.
here? He says he's a little grumpy from time to time. I get a little grumpy from time to time. I've told this story before too. I think that the first couple of days on the Iceland trip with the McKays, I was a little grumpy with myself. I didn't feel like I was making pictures that were reflective of the amazing landscapes we're seeing. But that just settled out, and I just started enjoying myself, and then felt like I was starting to make good pictures. So, I'm also working on that interview with a guy who's got a lot of Instagram followers, Vader Breath, Noah Greer, and he was talking about how he was getting we've had a terrible winter in Vermont, terrible as in not much snow, kind of a cold period, and kind of just a yucky period, and that was really affecting his mood, and he was seeing that results of that, mood in his pictures. So get yourself into a positive light, and it's probably going to allow you to make better pictures. All right. What was our next story? Megapixels. Yeah. Scott, how many megapixels do you want?
Oh, Sony.
Give me a precise number.
I
24.
am really happy with 24. I have no reason to go above 24. 24 allows me to make relatively large prints if needed. And if I needed to do anything bigger than that, I would probably have a camera specifically for that purpose, like a 5DSR or something like that. I do not need 80 megapixels. I don't need 42, which is why I didn't buy the A7R2. I was quite happy with 24. I certainly don't want to pay for the privilege of having that many megapixels. I think if you have that many megapixels, it actually becomes a problem not only for processing, for storage. Storage is cheap, but you still have to store it, and it still costs you more money. And it becomes a camera shake issue, because when you have a 100 megapixel file, it's effectively like putting a super telephoto zoom on your camera, and then you're not really supposed to view images at 100%, but at 100%, which is how you would want that print, if you blew it up so big, you're going to have camera shake issues.
So the rumor is that the Sony A7R Mark III, which we don't have a date for yet, may have a sensor somewhere in the range of 70 to 80 megapixels, which seems quite insane. As Scott says, I have the Sony A7R Mark II, which does have the 42 megapixels. There have been times where having that many megapixels is nice for cropping. I don't like to make that a habit, but the number of times where I've really needed that has been very, very few, and not at all in the wedding work. Only for that bird picture I posted the other day, and a couple other, kind of Instagram shots where I'm like, well, I can really crop this down because I've got all of the megapixels I need, and if I'm just putting it on Instagram. Which brings me to the point of, what are you doing with most of your work? Even if you're a professional, like you said, and you're shooting for a couple, or you're shooting for print publications, the sizes of your prints, 24 megapixels is more than enough. 16 megapixels is more than enough for many, many, many people. So it's just, this is a little insane. I'd like to see Sony dial it back a little and focus on some other things. The reason I think that we still are seeing this megapixel race is it is that number that a consumer can look at and say, well, that one's better. And I feel like in the last year or two, people have been a little bit better about this. The dynamic range has been a discussion topic that I hear even consumers asking about, not even, a step below the prosumer level. So that's good, but I really would like to move away from that being the end-all, be-all, that makes a camera better. And I don't think we're quite there yet, and Sony apparently doesn't think we're quite there yet either, so that they can come out and tout a camera with this size sensor.
I think I think what Sony's been doing a lot with their A7, A7R, A7R2 is kind of looking at what people are generally saying that they think they want in a camera, and they're just throwing it in there. And people will talk about, I think we'd like more megapixels and a stabilized sensor and being able to use third-party lenses. And it's almost as if somebody's sitting there on a notepad just scratching it, going, "Yeah, I think we got that. Yeah, oh, A7R3. This will sell." And in fairness to them, the A7R2 has sold really, really well. And a lot of people that do channels, your channel, the Northrops, Matt Granger had one. Well, you can't argue with them, can you? And effectively, what do we know? Maybe there is this demand there. Maybe they've got a huge market research
that's
team,
true.
And they're going to start going after the medium format market.
But if you think back to why I said the counterpoints to Sony's full frame being crap, I didn't list 42 megapixels as one of the reasons that I picked up the A7R2. I would have been happy at the 24 or 32-ish megapixels. For me, it was just that sensor performance, the 4K, the in-body image stabilization thing. So, but sometimes it's a little bit of a bonus for me that it has that many megapixels. But as I said, when we'd come back from a wedding and I shot a little bit more with the Sony than the Canon at a couple of weddings, it was a massive amount of data to go through. And our Lightrooms and our computers, they'll catch up, but not yet. And Lightroom might not. It's a little bit of a pig.
Well, Lightroom might not.
That slows you down.
I think the 5D Mark IV will probably come in slightly higher.
I think that was my prediction.
Than the 5D Mark III, maybe something about 28.
Yep.
And I think that'll be a nice number. It is nice to sometimes have a little bit more to crop with or something like that. But once you start, and again, how's ISO performance going to be 80 megapixels?
They've done a nice job, along with Nikon.
You fanboy.
Using Sony sensors. All right. I think we've got that. There's a couple more news stories. We're just going to read the titles if you're interested in hearing more about them. It's just, out of nowhere, although there was one for the 7D too. Canon has released a 7D Mark II studio version. You're like, oh, what's different about it? You can hook a barcode scanner to it. It's mostly for people at like theme parks or doing portrait setups at school, so they can scan the little kid's barcode and all the information automatically gets written into the picture, so we keep track of all that. Kind of interesting. Canon Canada hikes lens prices almost 20% on everything. Sorry, Canadians. That stinks. It's all about the fluctuating dollar, right? And related to that, Lightroom price increases coming in 6 countries on May because of currency fluctuations as well. You were not one of them. It's like Australia. I heard about this first from Tony Lawrence, one of our Australian supporters. Do you? No.
We already pay more than you.
What does that work out to in dollars?
I pay £10 a month for my photography bundle.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Somebody will.
No.
So Switzerland.
$13, $14, something like that. Somebody in the chat
they lowered prices in Switzerland and Liechtenstein. Liechtenstein, yes, but it's coming up in Australia, New Zealand, India, Norway, Turkey, and Brazil.
I'm really happy for the 10 photographers in Liechtenstein that have benefited from that.
Lytro is completely exiting the consumer photography businesses and focusing on VR. I thought we knew that already. And Huawei's P9 smartphone packs a dual camera co-engineered with Leica. Nobody really knows what this co-engineered means. I think they just paid them to be able to use the word Leica. But the idea of these dual cameras, I've got it on the LG V10 with 2 front-facing. Yep. We've got a rumor that the next iPhone, the plus size, will have dual back cameras to give you different focal lengths. I really like that. These are really nice photo machines, and anything they do to add to them is good. All right. Now, we move on to that section of the show where I go, photos from space. And we've actually got 2 quick stories. The first is, if anybody's got a spare 400 to 600,000 laying around, you could put a bid on this lens right here that went to the moon and took 293 photos during the Apollo 15 mission. It's even got a little bit of tape on it that may have some lunar dust stuck to the tape. So, kind of exciting. I think that's all. The one other thing is they made some modifications to the lens to make it easier to use with their big gloves. But it's a 500 millimeter lens. I wish they had a couple of pictures that they used to take it. They don't, do they? Oh, maybe this one right here? Or maybe they just found that. So, pretty cool to think about owning something. I just wonder who actually buys that. And then the other thing is, William shared this with me this week. This is an older picture because it is of the space shuttle, which hasn't launched in quite a while. I think it's also had that tilt shift effect applied to it. But this is a pretty cool shot of the space shuttle breaking through the cloud layer and climbing into the upper reaches of the atmosphere. And you know, the miniature effect on it, it just makes, I think, everything feel even just that much smaller. But in effect, it really is this tiny little spaceship traveling above the planet. All right. Now what? Let's talk about Instagram. So for those who don't know, we have a weekly Instagram challenge where we give you a topic or a theme. You create a picture or find an old picture that matches, still letting that happen, and you throw it up on your Instagram account and tag it. It's been a lot of fun. I've really enjoyed. It's kind of like the longest running thing we have done in all of PhotoRec TV. I think we're up to like week 44 or 45, or coming up on a year. We'll have to do something special for the year. And on this show, you and I pick our winners and some honorable mentions, and tomorrow a post will go up where you can see these. And it's a great way to just to kind of get out of a rut sometimes if you feel like you're in a rut, or to gain some followers, or gain a little bit of recognition, because your pictures might get shown on the show. All right, you want to share a couple of you want to share your winners, and you're on top of it. Go for it.
Yep, I am sharing my screen. This is literally just at the moment that one of the cats has come to say hello, but never mind, she'll stay here for a bit. So we picked old, and this was what I put this week. I visited, well, last week technically, I suppose it's still in the window. I visited the birthplace of Shakespeare, which is Stratford-upon-Avon. That's pretty old, 1888. His house was there as well. I did not get a shot of that, which is probably not very good, but oh well. So this was my shot. So we'll go into the honourable mentions. Gunter is in our Patreon group, and we've watched you progress quite a lot. This popped out at me because I remember Walkmans. I had a Walkman, and then I had a Discman, and then I had, well, iPod. But I remember walking along with, well, I don't even want to care to share what was in my ears at the time. But this is great. The super bass really did it for me. I like the shot technically. It's well framed. It's very level, and they've manipulated depth of field nicely. It's a good shot. And when I try and judge these things, I look through the feed of just something that jumps out at me. And this appealed to me probably because of my past. So yeah, I really like this one. Second honourable mention was by this character. Is it G or Zoran? They've put in the title up here. I have a bit of a soft spot for cats, so I didn't pick this as a winner. But this is a really nice shot. The eye is tack sharp. The background's lovely, well blurred. It's well framed, and it's an old cat, and it's something that somebody's interpreted for PR TV old. It's good seeing different interpretations of what people are thinking can be used. So that's a really nice shot. But my winner this week is Tim Tim again is in our Patreon group. This is great because of mostly it's a good shot. It's a very good shot, technically nice shot again. It's quite symmetrical. It's well framed. And I like the history behind it. It's just one of those things that when I was scrolling through the feeds, it jumped out at me. 38 years ago, Tim's late mum gave him
That's a nice
this
shot.
Swiss Army
Tim,
knife
Tim,
for his 60th
Tim posted
birthday, and he's still
a
using
handful
it.
of shots in the support
That's great.
group this
That's
week
a great
that,
story.
were
That's
really nice.
really
nice
nice.
job of those, Tim. And yeah, I like that. Good shot. All right, we'll switch over to me. It's fun to see how different people interpret old. I wouldn't have necessarily done Walkman, thinking about the first thing I walked around with was like a giant boom box, but that's okay. I don't want to date myself too much. So my first picture that I picked is actually Roy's picture. And I think, Roy, this is the first time I've picked your picture. I really like this. It's an old camera, your treatment here, and it almost looks like you free lens this. There's something going on up here that just adds a little bit of softness to it. But I really think this is a really nicely exposed black and white, and just kind of like how the camera's coming into the frame, and it looks very nice, very old. And then I picked one by Tim too, not the knife, but this one that has this whole kind of story. The lighting in this picture, Tim, is just fantastic. I really like it. It just has this kind of whole complete story, and there are bits that are cut off, but in such a way that it's all framed so very nicely. I would like to see a tiny bit more separation right here between the edge of the watch and the paper, but that's getting very picky. And overall, I think this is with Alex's shot of really seeing them progress. It's been fantastic watching people, really progress their photography. And my winner picture, my winning picture, is Cameron's Sunrise in Ephesus, which is an old Greek city. The leading lines here were led down this walkway. It's all, of course, old and ruins, but with that little bit of light coming in, I think this is, sunrise, it says. The light at this time of day is just fantastic, so the shadows are pretty soft still, and it just feels warm and inviting, but at the same time, ancient or old, as the tag was. So, very nice. Thank you all to those who participated. And as I said, you'll be able to see all of these pictures in greater detail on the blog tomorrow. Next week, so from time to time we have these challenges, and then you all do such an amazing job. I think Tim's might almost do it for me this week as well, of kind of telling a story. And so I want to give you that challenge in the next week. Pick a picture, or take a picture, make a picture that tells a story inside that one photo. And I'll leave the rest up to you, but you just got to throw it online and hashtag it PRTV_story. And I think that's going to be on the screen in a second, Riley, or it will be on the screen, and it will be linked below as too. All right. Now, are you ready to answer some questions? Okay, let's answer some questions. We're doing a decent job of keeping this.
That answers the questions.
Somebody wants to know how I'm liking the Canon 80D. I haven't used it yet. I need to get my hands on it. I think schedule-wise, I probably won't until after I come back from Utah, which the Utah trip is happening next week. But I'm okay with it. Sounds like it's a very nice camera. I heard Jared Poland was ecstatic over the fact that you could touch to focus on the app, which is something you could do in the 70D as well. And there were a lot of other ways to do that and a lot of other cameras, but that's okay. That's fine. It did blow his mind. Sorry, I'm not making fun of him. It's just funny because every once in a while I'll come across something and be like, oh, this is amazing. Yeah. And then I'll Google and find out that it's been around for a while. It seems like a very nice camera. Nice upgrade from the 70D. In general, and I'll say this about the A6300, so very rarely does it make sense for you to jump up to the very next model from whatever you have. So A6000 users, you have to have a couple of specific reasons that would make me say, oh yeah, that's a better upgrade for you, as opposed to spending your money on a lens. Same with 70D users. You have to have a couple of specific needs or reasons for saying you might want to upgrade before I'll agree that that's a good idea, as opposed to spending money on a lens. But from earlier models and as an evolution of the Canon line, I think it's very good, and I don't have any complaints about it yet from what I've heard. Do we think that mirrorless will eventually overtake DSLR? or is there room for both to exist in the marketplace?
I don't think that one is necessarily better than the other, really. I think they're two different systems. I think people will continue to compare them. Obviously, they're cameras, and you've now got full frame mirrorless as well. But they can happily coexist. DSLRs are always, well, with current, I suppose, current technology, it's probably not well. Yeah, definitely always is. Well, say I'm not going to take 4K stills from video like you said, but I think that DSLRs are always going to be better for sports with the way that the focuses system works, and the focuses system is not on the sensor. However, particularly with my example for portraits and headshots, I would pick the Sony. For me, that when it gets focus,
Right.
It's definitely got it. It very rarely does it think it's in focus and it's not. Whereas I find I tend to have to make micro adjustments more on a DSLR. That's just my experience. I prefer shooting with an EVF in certain situations, but in others I prefer an optical viewfinder. One thing I actually did find at the weekend was that the Sony didn't focus well enough in low light when I was trying to use strobes.
Yeah.
But the Canon had no problem at all. So in that scenario, I would want to use the Canon. I think they
Well,
can
you want to compare
coexist.
them depending on what you need as a photographer. Yes, but otherwise, once you've got what you need as a photographer, just go take pictures. I think there will be a point in the future where the mirrors are going to disappear. I'm not sure how. It's not next year. It's not the year after. Probably not the year after that. But at some point, the technology is going to catch up enough that you just don't need the mirrors, and there won't be enough of an advantage or any advantage at all in that, I think. So, but we're a ways away from that still. Richard's got travel tripod recommendations. Are the really right stuff tripods, the TQC14, worth the additional premium price, or the cheaper ones, half the price, are equally as good? Really right stuff is from your neck of the woods, aren't they? Aren't they an English brand? Or am I thinking, I'm thinking of three-legged thing.
Yeah. Three-legged thing. I think
they do.
Most of these kind of tripods all look very, very similar.
A lot of them are. The really right stuff. As far as the legs go, I think they're all pretty decent. When it comes down to it, though, is the heads. I've noticed a pretty big difference, and that's where the really right stuff is very good. Their heads are top-notch, super thoughtfully designed, are going to last a lifetime. I can't say that about some of the third-party ones as much.
I've got I think it's called Reged, and they claim that it's all Dutch made. It looks to me exactly the same as the cheap ones that you get on eBay or Amazon. It's nice, it's quite lightweight, it's a travel tripod, it's not carbon fibre or anything, but it does the job, it's sturdy enough. So, I think most of the tripods, to be honest, in that kind of little areas are much of a muchness. I think until you get to a certain price point, the super expensive ones, I think the only thing you're really starting to save is weight.
I like the Mi Photos. I think they're a nice kind of sweet spot in the middle there that offer a nice compact travel size. Again, their heads are nice. Good. They're not amazing. They're not like the really right stuff. But then again, the really right stuff heads cost more than 4 Mi Photo tripods put together. So all depends. Do we have opinions about the Peak Design capture clip? Is it worth the money? No. I've got one too. I don't use it.
It's not in this bag. I have it. I have so far not used mine. I don't want to spoil a review that is coming up. However, I do not like it for heavy cameras. A lot of the advertising is based around 7D Mark II, 5D Mark III, etc. I have not found it to be the case that it supports those too well. The weight balance just doesn't feel right at all. Mm-hmm. It's largely based around what you've got it attached to. However, when I've tried to attach it to something fairly sturdy, it's too thick and you can't get the grip around it. It feels brilliantly made. I can't stress that enough. It is really well made. And I'm reluctant to talk about it negatively until I've tested it with
Something a little lighter.
like a 750D.
Right.
With with like a 50 STM on it, like just a general walk around bit. But for if you've got something like a 5D Mark III, Mark II, anything above probably a D610 Nikon.
I will say that if, for the bigger stuff, the spider
it's
holster
worth
system I found
personally.
fantastic. Bigger, much more comfortable. But for general photography, I think you look like a dork walking around with that. If you don't care, you know, maybe I shouldn't care, but I just like, I don't
Big
want
dork
that on me unless I'm doing a job. So the Peak design is nice with little travel cameras, being able to keep it out and keep it much more accessible. But yeah, I found the same thing with heavier stuff. It's not very comfortable. Any insight or reviews of the Pentax K1 upcoming?
No.
Probably not. I could say maybe, but I doubt it. I just have to make decisions. I've talked about this before, that I would love to review lots more stuff, but I don't really have the time. I don't know, maybe we can get it to you, Scott, but I don't really have the time, and I don't want this channel to be full on reviews. I want to do other things as well. And they're just, when I think about the number of views that would get, it just isn't very much. So it's probably not worth my time. It looks like, yeah.
Without plugging another channel, the camera store is set fire to 1.
Is that what they,
so maybe go and look at that. Yeah. They've tested since Pentax have marketed as this kind of indestructible cameras.
It sounds like something they would do.
They've beat the hell out of one a bit. Like
my favorite camera and lens for street photography
7D.
currently, the Sony A7R Mark II with the 55 f1.8. It's a fairly compact system. I just really like it. That 55-1.8 is a small, lightweight lens, and it gives me amazing quality, sharp, wide open. Do you have a favorite setup for walking around? Yeah. That's a close second for me.
LG G4.
Let's see.
Perfect.
Where are we? For traveling vlogs, quality-wise, which is better, the A5100 or the G7X? Yeah. Or is it the Canon?
G7X is the Panasonic Lumix, isn't it? Is that right?
Yeah, you should Google it. Why I Google G7Z. No, it's the Canon.
Should I Google it?
Yeah, so what size sensor is that? That is that
G7X
1-inch sensor, whereas the A5100 has an APS-C size sensor in it. You go watch my Italy videos. Those were all shot with the A5100. I was very happy with the quality, the nice flip-up screen for seeing. It's a very nice system. It's a little bulkier because you're going to have lenses on it than the G7X. But the A5100 is going to give you better quality and a more versatile system. Okay, I think we're gonna end our questions in this portion of the show right here. We're gonna come back in a minute in the after show. That's a section of the show where the Patreon supporters, they get to watch that at any time. If you're watching live, you get to watch the rest of this right now. But our Patreon group is fantastic. It's been growing, and that is that. Well, first off, you support me on this channel, and it helps us make videos, run this show, and bring you content of all different kinds of things. You also get access to the support group that I just mentioned, where there are a whole bunch of fantastic people like Scott, like Roy, and tons of other ones that are in there sharing their thoughts and opinions. There are discussions this week ranging from Anne's question of like, you know, she's starting to get a backlog. She's just shooting for fun. She's starting to get a backlog of pictures. Like, how do you manage staying on top of editing? And so people have all kinds of great suggestions there. There are questions about gear. There's questions about Lightroom. And you can get in there and get your answers to whatever you want. It's like having smart people around at any time that are going to share their thoughts and opinions on whatever photography-related questions you might have. Plus, you get access to my Lightroom videos, the whole catalog of them, and there's going to be a new video where I talk a little bit about panoramas and that whole boundary warp that's going into the Patreon-only group. That'll actually be out tomorrow. So there's all kinds of great content in there. And plus, as I said, you support this channel and you get to watch the after show and the critiques, which we're going to do in a minute after we wrap up a couple of things. So if you're interested in learning more about how you can support our work here at photorec.tv, you can go to photorec.tv/support. And thank you to those people who are making this show possible. All right? So, everybody, thanks for watching. Remember, you can follow us on our social medias. Links are down below. Show notes are down below.
Thank you for watching.
And we will be back in a minute for the after show. Goodbye.